Welcome back to Green Disruptors Scaling the Future, the show where we explore the people, strategies, and technologies building a low-carbon economy in real time. Today's conversation is one of the most important questions in climate. How do we make sure capital is flowing to the right solutions? My guest is Noah Miller, co-founder of Rho Impact. He spent years in the trenches of sustainability consulting, and now he's helping investors, consultants, and fund managers answer a deceptively simple question. How good is this climate solution going to be? By when and at what scale? We talk about the gap between strategy and action, why better data changes behavior, what 2026 looks like for climate capital, and why he calls their software the Iron Man suit for climate investors. Hope you enjoy. Noah, welcome to Green Disruptors. Glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me, Megan. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I should always record our pre-conversations because that's where the most laughter tends to happen. But we were joking. It took a lot to make this happen. And we're blaming the children.
And we appreciate everybody's flexibility and understanding.
Yep, that is the modern way of life with kids. So anyway, let's talk about you though. So tell us who you are, a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah, so Noah Miller, one of the co-founders of Rho Impact. We're a climate advisory and software company. Myself, I've been a career sustainability consultant and practitioner. So although we're maybe a software company, I myself am not on the tech side, but have been really amazed on what technology can enable for folks that are in the field, in the trenches, grinding it out to figure out how do we decarbonize everything and make sure that we have a, inclusive, resilient, low carbon economy at some point.
So you're really seeing the connection between like the strategies you suggest and the way it's almost easier to implement said strategies with the way technology is evolving.
That's right. That's right. And I'm, very lucky to have I think the best team in the game in terms of the software engineering and the scientific underpinnings that really, as a consultant and someone more on the commercial side, it's been really incredible to see what better data, what better software, what that can really open up for folks that are working in this, sometimes ambiguous space of climate planning and investment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I told you we were going to dive into the deep end and you took that as literal fact. So we'll back up. So we'll get into the details of that later because that's definitely what we're going to talk about. But let's back up a little bit and tell us about kind of what problems initially led to the creation of Rho Impact.
Yeah. So I'd say the real impetus for a lot of this work has been how do we make sure that more capital is going to better climate solutions, right? Big question mark, easier said than done. And that's where we wanted to really be able to start thinking about how can we package a lot of this work we've been doing as consultants, tech-enabled consultants using a lot of data and software to enable, more commercial outcomes. How can we make this easier for everybody working on this, working in the field of determining how good is this thing out of the thousands of things we could do? How good is it going to be? By what year, at what scale, so we can actually act with some confidence and some real clarity. So it's been, that's really the problem statement is better data for better decision-making on long-term outcomes that affect, not only businesses, but, the world at large here with climate really being the defining, issue of our time.
Yeah, for sure. I think the key word that stood out to me and everything you just said is act, because you can strategize all day and you can give somebody really good advice. And that resonated with me as a marketer because it's like, here's what you should be doing. But if there's no way to clearly get boots on the ground doing the thing, and to be able to implement the solution, then who cares?
And that's I'm so glad you called that out, Megan, because as someone, historically being on the strategy side a lot, I could not agree with you more on it's great to paint a clear picture of the future that's, compelling. But when the data is there to support it, we can actually move it from, rhetoric to reality and sort of big plans to big outcomes.
Yeah, totally. Tell us, obviously you're wanting to make sure that the right and the good technologies are getting the funding, but can you maybe describe like who your ideal partner is?
So we have been working, you mentioned partners. We are very partnership heavy and, teamwork makes the dream work. And this stuff is really the ultimate team sport, in our opinion. So we sort of work across the stack of people that have the same question of how good is this thing going to be if it scales, by when, by how much, and what can we do to mobilize, whether it's capital or consultants advising on that as well, to put it in the right bets, right? Put the money in the right bet so that we can have the right impact that we need to continue on in this, this experiment of the human race here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be able to start acting now on these 2050 commitments. And it's really back to when you're strategizing a lot, it's easy to put together the plan in a boardroom.
Yeah.
But how do we get everyone on the same page across the capital stack, across, the innovators working on these emerging climate technologies, all the way to the capital allocators funding the scaling of these technologies? How do we pull a string across them so that they all can understand the same fundamental question? How good is this thing going to be if it scales? And then what are we all going to do about it if it is, in fact, is potentially effective as we think it's going to be?
Well, I can see how that totally helps the messaging with the VC partners and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit more about the actual solutions and the software as a piece of that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell a little bit of background story because, we've been obsessed with this question and this problem for since about 2017 when we teamed up with a group, the Prime Coalition for Catalytic Capital, that was trying to take a white paper from NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Department, on how do we forecast the potential impact of emerging climate technologies? Our firm put our hand up with a how can we help? And we ended up becoming the software and engineering team, as well as the methodology team supporting this platform, this software that was the first of its kind, the CRANE tool, carbon reduction assessment for new enterprise, to be able to take this really important idea from the white paper in NYSERDA and make it into usable software for practitioners and investors. Fast forward a little bit. We were being brought on to consult on top of CRANE for years in terms of being able to bring it to one step deeper of granularity or one step deeper of a customization for the use cases of the clients. So we took all of those learnings on this public benefit tool and all of the advising we were doing on top of that to essentially build out the dream tool of KOI. And KOI is, I'd say, the product of all of that blood, sweat, and tears, engineering work, learning, falling, getting back up again, learning again. So it's really the culmination of, close to a decade of trying to figure out this question.
Yeah. Does KOI stand for something, or is that like I like it either way.
You could, I always joke, it's like carbon optimization insights, carbon with a K, but that's not it. It's really around, I believe, the crane coin and something
I mean, it's
around the
very Asian.
animals. But I do not have a classy or a very slick response for where does koi come from? It was a little bit of a brainchild of a lot of interesting branding discussions.
I was gonna say maybe I'll just come up with a branding story and caricature, so that next time you get asked that question.
Well, Megan, I used to joke, and then I found out how bad this was. That similar to the thousands of climate products, services, technologies that all have their own avoided emissions, curve to them over time, that a koi fish only has one pattern of swimming. And every koi fish has a unique swimming pattern. That's kind of what I had assumed, but I found out that was not the case. So we would love to have your insight.
All right, this is going to take some real creativity, but I'm up for the challenge. Anyway, okay, so tell me what the current moment is looking like. Like, what kind of partnerships are happening? What is growth looking like?
Yeah, well, we're about to have some really exciting partnership announcements. I can't say too much about it now, except there are, global networks of folks that are committing to climate solution allocations and avoided emissions goals and things that KOI is really purpose-built to do. So those network effects are going to be, I think, really impactful from not only is it the people that are, publicly committing to allocating these things and need to have a paper trail and a way to view different deals and forecast is this going to hit the allocation or avoided emissions goals we have. But it's really around socializing the idea that we can make better decisions today on the future because we have the data, we have the structured, and we really have organized this complex sort of mess of information so that you're able to look at out of the things we could do across industries, by years, by different scales, what's going to work for us, knowing we're starting with thousands of things we could be doing or investing in or advising on. So that, you asked me what's growth looking like. We think that this, next year, Q1 of 2026 is going to be really impactful from Partnerships are going live. Allocation commitments are starting to ramp up in stringency. You're just seeing the market move in the direction of, even if ESG is hyper political here in the US, and, you
Right.
have, different, funds being sued from different state attorneys' offices. This is still happening, whether it's being publicly communicated often or more in closed doors. The toothpaste is out of the tube and
Yeah.
not going back in.
I agree, and I'm, like, grateful to be in this space because I think if I was just in the regular news media, I'd be freaking out a little more than I am. I mean, it's still not great, but things are happening behind the scenes that are gonna be really impactful. Ramble on my end. So, what I wanna know is, what do you tell potential partners or people who like, how are you different? Like, other people claiming to do the same things, like, what makes you guys different or more effective?
Well, luckily, we have such a public digital paper trail at this point that,
Mhm.
you know, if you do any sort of diligence or research on us, you'll see that we've been doing this work for a long time. I think the other element is because of the tooling that we've been putting out there. And, I've been working with the Corporate Finance Institute for many years on supporting their ESG training program that now is being used by many folks that we hope will use Koi at some point. There's a clear track record that we've been leading the thinking, the ideation, the tooling, the data aggregation, sort of the best practices, the tools, the data, everything that people need to equip themselves to be able to do the work that they're tasked to do in these roles. But the frameworks, the best practices that have really been tried and true through rolling up your sleeves and being in the trenches. You got to be doing this stuff for a while, and you got to be doing it at a
Yeah.
high intensity. And luckily or not, we were born and raised in this space. So this is not like a new service
This is
area.
your habitat.
This is our bread and butter, in our habitat. So all of that, as folks are every single consulting firm is building out a sustainability practice. Every single data provider is building out a sustainability data offering. Everybody is seeing the need for this work and the opportunity. But at the end of the day, subject matter and content background really matters in this work. So if you haven't been, in the trenches, you're
Served
not
your time.
exactly.
Mhm.
Got to earn your stripes in this space, and there couldn't be, I think, a more compelling time to try to bring your talents, like you mentioned, to this field. When we need everybody moving in the same direction the best we can.
Yeah. So it's a challenging space to be in, but it is exciting and impactful as well. So, um, tell me, by the way, I love your Einstein picture in the background. I forgot to comment.
Well, that quote too, it says, "Great spirits will always encounter violent opposition from mediocre
Mm,
minds." So that's a little bit of inspiration of you got to keep fighting the good fight because you're always going to get the pushback.
yeah. I swear that's like the older I get, maybe I'm getting wiser, but like the more true this is each passing year.
So that's why I had to have it on the wall so I could get that constant reminder.
Yeah, it's that one and the Theodore Roosevelt one about being bloody in the arena. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard that's a popular one these days,
Yes,
but it's like, "Oh, you're in the arena, you're the one with the bruises and the scars, so that means you're
that's
doing it."
right.
Okay, so what do you see as like, obviously, there's gonna be some great things happening in 2026. Are there goals tied to that as far as growth of the company goes, or how do you guys measure that?
Yeah. We have for a long time used the OKR system, everyone's been using that, as of recently. So that's been really good in kind of keeping a distributed team aligned, charting towards the same path when we're all working on different clients and different elements of the software and different parts of the business. So that's been really helpful. And I will say, there's always some pretty consistent patterns of challenges with fully distributed teams and,
Yeah. You
meeting.
went right where I wanted you to go. So tell us about what those I mean, yeah, these are problems that businesses face at, whatever stage of growth you're at, but tell me what that specifically is looking like and how you deal with those.
Yeah. It's always the balance, and I'm sure you know this so well. It's always that balance of, we need time together as teammates. We need to be able to sort of Vulcan mind meld and share learnings and
I
really
love that
iterate fast.
analogy.
But you also know that when you hang out with people that love the work, it can turn into like a couple, and you're like, what happened to the afternoon? Because we went down so many rabbit holes that we're all psyched about, but we don't have time to be in too many rabbit holes at once. So that's always seems to be the challenge,
It's
with
hard to simplify. when you got so many brilliant analytical minds working together.
Yeah, and when when you genuinely like each other as colleagues,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like you
true
want
too.
to hang out, and it gets lonely in your solo office. That's like one of the real cultural operational intersections of we have to iterate fast. We need to share learnings. We're learning a ton sort of in these uh different meetings at the same time. How do we close the loop fast while also not taking all the daylight, out of each day here? So that's the big question. I
Yeah.
don't, if we have a clear answer, but we're definitely stumbling towards that.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. This is totally a relatable challenge. And I usually don't share too much about my own business, but something I do that helps with this is we have a daily top two. So, like, what are the two most impactful things that I, as a team member or whatever I do in the business, can do that will drive the needle forward? Those are the things I want to put the most of my energy towards. And it's a good way to filter out some of the stuff that makes you feel like you're being productive, but really, like, how much does this matter? Or should I be delegating this? Or,
Right,
so.
right. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
I like that a lot with the simplify and cut out the noise.
Yeah, because it's like it's not a question of people not being hard workers about, like, just so many
Yeah, I
things.
mean, it's, especially as we've talked about earlier on, it's like, one of the cool things about Row and our team is, most of us are young parents of young kids. And that's a whole nother business continuity issue to manage that, is another interesting one, especially when, back to the culture and managing that with the operational realities of scaling a small business.
I think that's really interesting, especially in the climate space, because the whole challenge is taking something that we inherited that is a way of doing things, and we're trying to get everybody to change that really quickly. And like, obviously, it's really hard, but I think we're changing our work cultures and our mentality around work at the same time. And I
For
think
sure.
it's equally important to get the job done. It's cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and shout out to Mamava, born out of here, Burlington, Vermont, created the pod industry and really been pushing the needle on infrastructure and this whole concept.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, this is like so exciting from products and services that are addressing these real like societal, cultural, like very real operational, daily operational challenges. So, where I was going with this was it's just remarkable to see how people are bringing these market-based solutions to these broader societal challenges. And I like to think we're kind of on a similar vein from here's a solution for the capital people that need to make returns. They need to be able to demonstrate and substantiate how they're delivering on these emission reduction goals. It's like, let's make a solution for the market that addresses these higher order societal challenges, like, the intersection of climate and social risk and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think that the underlying tie there is like you have to work with reality and human psychology, or else whatever you're trying to do is just going to get stuck in the mud. Maybe we can kind of wrap up the conversation here. Do you have a case study scenario you could share with us about a specific client and some of the things that have happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one, our website is full of case studies just for folks in the audience, but I will mention, the biggest case studies and use cases I would say, at this point is once you have an idea of your impact for what you're selling, you're able to fundraise more. You're able to
Mm.
sell bigger deals because you're able to hit those higher order objectives around 2050 commitments, these year-over-year KPIs, these really complicated, pressures that our buyers are facing.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the biggest use case. We have, everyone from, large capital allocators using Koi to do due diligence on the funds that they're investing in and be able to demonstrate how they're hitting their thesis and allocation commitments,
Right.
to the GPs that need to demonstrate upwards and downwards that they're walking the walk, all the way to the consultants that are needing to substantiate really every piece of counsel, every moment of the
Right.
day. And
Like
it's
we're not
all
just
feeding back.
saying this. Here's
That's
the
right.
data
Back
to
to the
back it up. Yeah.
the
Mhm.
strategizing. It all comes back to the by when, by how much, by what scale, by what year, and really making that easier for folks to sort through and not going, Excel crazy. So I would say if any of this resonates in the audience, check it out, make a free account, koi.eco. And I think you'll be picking up what I'm putting down.
Nice. I'm just curious, do you see like a reaction when people actually see that data laid out in front of them? Like, I would imagine it's empowering, but what?
So I think it's probably akin, I always joke around, it's kind of akin to learning a new language in ways where it's, if you speak the language immediately, it's like the Iron Man suit of this work, where Tony Stark is a smart
Yeah,
guy, still a smart guy, but a superhero when he puts on the Iron Man suit. And Koi is a
I
very
love this
similar.
analogy.
Yeah.
Koi in an Iron Man suit, that's the new branding angle. I don't know.
I think that's been sort of the one-on-one discussion is hey, if you're an Avengers fan, watch Marvel movies. Koi is the Iron Man suit for the climate consultant of tomorrow, or the climate investor of tomorrow. Not to get too superhero-ish, but I do truly believe that this thing is the closest thing to a silver bullet out there, and we have to start making placing the right bets, because if we don't, we're betting, we've already made our bet, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
check it out.
That's it. Mic drop. Okay. Well, thanks so much. This was exciting. Glad we finally made it happen, and I look forward to hearing about the partnerships and what's happening in 2026.
And thank you for having me again. This was awesome.
Yeah, great pleasure. Thank you for joining me, Noah, and thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to check out Rho Impact and the work Noah and his team are doing at koi.eco. Because here's the truth, 2050 commitments don't matter if we don't make better decisions today. As always, if you're building in climate, scaling clean energy, or thinking deeply about where capital flows next, this show's for you. Subscribe, share this with someone in the climate investment space, and I'll see you next time on Green Disruptors Scaling the Future. This podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing, your growth partner in clean energy.